Hello, my name is Achim Dobermann. I'm the Deputy Director General for Research of the International Rice Research Institute, or IRRI. And the gentleman beside me here is Lee Weil. He's the head of our experimental station. And what we want to do with you in the next few months is actually learn how to grow a crop of rice. Not just any crop of rice, we want to do it in the best possible manner we can think of. Now, we are scientists, so we do a lot of research, and we believe that we know a lot about rice and how to grow it in different parts of the world, and we have lots of recommendations for farmers and extension workers. We often call them best management practices. You can find them on the internet, on our Rice Knowledge Bank, in extension materials, in books, in scientific papers. But what we really want to do is try to practice what we preach. Because often we as scientists may come up with things that, don't really work in practice, or sometimes we wonder why aren't people using them. So that's why Lee and I have decided, well, why don't we do it ourselves, as much as we can do ourselves, because some of the things we may not be really qualified to do, but we'll try, okay? We will be qualified. Well, this is day one of the great challenge. So our first job today is to level the field. Now, Lee, why is leveling the field so important, and how do we do this?
For wet-seeded rice, you're dealing with a seedling that is 2 days old, young and very fragile. And there's the two most important criteria you've got to meet early are water control and weed control. And in some ways they're one and the same. So by levelling, you can ensure that each seedling has a consistent amount of water, or a consistent lack of water, depending on what you're trying to achieve at the time.
So we really think levelling the field is the very first and most important step, probably, to get a good crop established, particularly if it's wet-seeded rice, as we want to do in our agronomy challenge this year.
Yes, we're targeting a high yield. And for a high yield, we need a good establishment density. We need a good number of plants in the field, so we need a good survival of and growing of the seeds that we will put out with the drum seeder in 2 days' time. And levelling is definitely the foundation upon which a good high yield is built.
When you grow rice, of course, as a farmer, you have to choose a variety to grow. So we have chosen a variety called NSIC RC222, or in the Philippines it's also called locally Tubigan 18, but it is actually an IRRI variety, so it has also the IRRI designation IRRI 154. Now, why did we choose this? It can yield with good management easily 6, 7, maybe even more tons per hectare. And it is a relatively new variety. We place a lot of emphasis on this because more recently released varieties are better adapted to the current climate, and they can therefore have better adaptation to the yield potential situation, the environment that we have nowadays. This variety was released in 2010, and that factor, using a more recent variety, can often give a yield advantage of 5 to 10%.
We began with certified seed. Now, this seed has been germination tested, and it tested at greater than 90%. It was soaked, put in water 36 hours ago, and then drained about 16 or 17 hours ago and incubated for that length of time. It's got a short root, and even on some it's got a short shoot already. So this is about ideal for using a drum seeder that we'll touch on shortly. The root and shoot could be a little bit longer and it'd still be okay, so we've got a few hours to spare, which might be helpful.
Yeah.
And the seed is ready.
What are we going to do, Lee?
I suspect the conclusion is we're not going to drum seed. This is the depth of our mud. So as such, the wheels of the drum seeder sink too far into the mud, and hence the metering units sit on the mud and fail to function as metering units.
Do you do that?
A few metres out ahead of you once you can.
Just control.
Just
there.
little
Yes.
fits, like this.
You want to?
You do like that?
Yeah. See?
Okay, Lee. On a scale 1 to 10, what do you think we've accomplished in terms of spreading our seed uniformly?
I think when we started the field we were barely 5, but overall I think I'd give us a 7 or an 8. The uniformity is quite good. We're aiming for a plant density of 150 plants a square metre, and there's plenty of seeds in the field spread uniformly to achieve just that. We can lose a few seeds and we'll still be fine.
I had a lot of trouble initially. I think, looking too much on the ground, trying to sprinkle seed in little patches, but later I think I got the swing, like the broad swing, looking straight ahead, walking and throwing. So I'm quite hopeful that I improved over time, but we'll see in a week, I guess, what emerges.
What we have here is an area that's representative of the higher areas of the fields, the areas that were well drained. So this probably represents 50 to 60% of the field. The drainage was good, the access to oxygen for the developing seed has been good. It's germinated quickly and strongly, it's got a green shoot very quickly, and its third leaf is already appearing. This is wet direct seeding as it should be done. These plants are happy. Now what we have here is an area that's representative of the intermediate zone, shall I say. When we seeded, it was too wet. It was a little bit too wet, and gradually during the week it gradually dried out, but it was still wetter than we'd like it to be. And you can see the seedlings are much smaller. They've had to fight for survival for much of the week, but they are establishing and they'll be okay even though they're slow. The establishment density is lower, but overall it's an acceptable result. So the seedlings were unhappy, but now they're okay. What we have here is an area representative of complete failure. The areas like this, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10% of the field stayed wet all week. They've only just become dry. That was too long for the rice plants. So here we have an area that's completely devoid of rice seedlings. All the rice seeds have died. So what we have is an uneven field, a non-uniform field. The drier areas have grown really well, the intermediate areas have grown okay, they'll be okay. But the wetter areas have been complete failures. So 5 to 10% of the field we're going to reseed to give it that second chance. True, being seeded almost a week later will mean it matures a little later, but rice does have a habit of catching up by the time you get to flowering and harvest, so I'm not that concerned. I think in hindsight we were seduced by technology. We looked to the laser levelling, laser guided larger equipment, when in hindsight I think the small equipment, the equipment invented here in the Philippines, would have given us a more level field. So don't always assume the high-tech path is the most effective one. So we're reseeding small areas, just the wetter areas, the drier areas where the rice is okay. That soil's now too dry, it won't seed successfully. The rice roots won't penetrate the soil, so there's no point putting seed there anyway. We're focusing purely on those small, very wet areas with no rice in them at all.
Now I'm also thinking over here, looking around here, there's an area with a rat fence over to my left.
It's ominous.
And now that can be good, because if you do have a rat problem, last year there was a rat problem just here, it's good to have what we call a trap crop, where you plant an area early, about 2 to 3 weeks early, and then have traps with multiple capture traps entrances like this, so the rats, they'll go in but can't get back out again. Particularly after the fallow period, the rats, there's big disturbance during the fallow period and the working of the soil. So the rats then get moved to the edges and they aggregate. And that's the best time to manage them. How? We have here Trappy the rat. And Trappy is used often when I talk to farmers. And we will show that they'll enter into the trap here and he'll force his way through.
Trappy's
and rats,
big.
Yeah, Trappy's big, but see how they sort of crunch down? And rats can do that as well. The only thing that limits a rat, they can dislocate their shoulders or whatever. It's the width of their head, which indicates as to how big the hole is they can get in. And with a mouse, if you push your finger in, a mouse can get into a hole. With a rat, it's more sort of probably a large thumb. So it's usually about 12 millimeters. If you've got a hole bigger than that, then the rats can get through. And so often, you don't need a very big opening here. The rats will force their way through.
What do we know about birds and their interactions with seeded rice?
Here in the Philippines and elsewhere in Asia, often it's using of what you've got here, the flags, to just cause a bit of disturbance. They have seen not far from here where they have like a little windmill, with a little ratchet on it making a noise, and that's supposed to keep the birds away as well. So it's looking at noise as a deterrent.
We came up after many years of research with tools that farmers and extension workers can use, and I'm going to use one of these tools here. So what I have here is a small tablet computer. It runs the Android system, and we have on this little tablet an application or app, as they're called nowadays, that we released last year for farmers in the Philippines as a first example. It's called Nutrient Manager Rice, or sometimes also Nutrient Manager Mobile. And it's very simple to use. It's all touch screen here, as you can see. If you don't have an Android smartphone like this, you can also use it through a normal phone and call a toll-free number in the Philippines. And all it does, it's asking you 12, 13, 14 questions about your field. So after I've done all this, voila, comes out a fertilizer recommendation.
This is a horrible sight.
One of the first issues with water management is wet-seeded rice currently is really sensitive to water. If you have too much water, the seeds die, and so that's why you need really good levelling. And secondly, it's why we really need to get anaerobic germination tolerance into rice seeds so that the technology is less difficult and less risky for farmers. So this field was lucky. After it was established, there were a few showers of rain which kept it going nicely. I don't think it's been irrigated yet, but Atkins just applying fertiliser, and so the ideal thing next will be to irrigate, to wash the fertiliser into the soil. One way to reduce the amount of irrigation water we apply to rice is to do what we call alternate wetting and drying. So this means we flood the field, then we let the water disappear, we let the surface dry down, and then we re-irrigate again. And anybody can do alternate wetting and drying, but the question is, how do you do it safely so that you don't lose any yield, because rice is so sensitive to too much drying. So over the years, IRRI's done a lot of research, and they've found that if we let the soil dry down below about 10 or 15 kilopascals, soil water tension at about 15 centimetres below the soil surface, the rice suffers. But 10 or 15 kilopascals probably doesn't mean anything to you, and it doesn't mean anything to farmers. Some really nice work with this really simple field water tube, which just shows you where the water table is. You could pull it out, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to pull this out if I can.
Yeah. 15 centimetres from the bottom, so you should push it into the muck. You can go a little bit further, it doesn't matter.
Okay. How often do you think I need to come out and check this?
Oh, well, it depends on the weather for a start. And it's...
But at least once a week, right?
yeah,
Maybe
at least
twice,
once a week, yeah.
Now, today we're measuring the plant density in the field. The plants have started to tiller, so it's getting a little bit difficult to count, but it's still okay. I'm using a 0.1 square metre, a 1/10 of a square metre ring, manufactured from some garden hose I stole from my wife. You throw the ring at random, preferably over your shoulder, that guarantees fairly random, and at several locations so you get it representative of the field. And the results we got averaged about 13 plants per ring, or 130 plants per square metre, but the lowest was 1 plant per ring and the highest was 32. So there's a lot of variation, but I still think we're okay.
Finbar, do we need to worry about insects at this early stage? Do we need to spray?
No,
Why not?
definitely not. At this stage, the insect damage can be completely compensated for by the plant. So normally the things you get at the early stage are things like leaf folder, a little bit of leaf folder, and whirl maggot. Whirl maggot actually is the biggest problem this time of year. But as the plant grows, it just disappears, because the plant, as the leaves get thicker, the maggots can't actually eat the leaf.
But you know, I keep worrying. I see things on the leaves like this here. Some things chewed on it. This is a whirl maggot.
That's a whirl maggot, yeah.
So nothing to worry about.
No problem. No problem.
It's just,
Yeah. In fact, this is even light. It's not even, you know, a normal infestation of whirl maggot.
what is this here? There's some egmas on it here. What
Yeah,
are
these are probably some sort of parasitoid that has. So it's a wasp cocoon, and these are beneficial again. So it's good news. These will fly off. There's about 40 of them there. So they'll fly off then and parasitize things like leaf folder, larvae, or other caterpillars. So they're again a beneficial insect.
Finbar, I already saw a few lady beetles, is what I would call them.
Yeah.
Are they playing much of a role at this early
They're
stage?
also very important. They're also feeding on the natural, the herbivore insects. So they eat eggs mainly. Also good predators of aphids. And also the dragonfly. There's a lot of dragonfly flying around. One of the things when you think about insects in rice, you have to remember that in the water, another problem generated by rice is mosquitoes. And the dragonfly larvae live in the water. They have a very big, strong jaws, and they prey on the mosquito larvae. So they're keeping your mosquitoes down. So really, there's a whole ecosystem here functioning to keep everything in order.
I mean, one really has to look hard to see all these things. I see a little spider web here, in which
Yeah.
some little insects are caught in there. What are those?
These are those midges that are flying around. These are the decomposer midges. So they're again beneficial. And spiders are very important predators of things like plant hoppers, mainly plant hoppers.
So, but you know, when I look around, I see lots of critters here, you know, insects of all kinds, little things flying or crawling. So is that one of the reasons that some farmers think they have to spray because they see all these insects?
Well, a lot of people don't understand what these insects are doing. So a lot of people, when they see these swarms of midges, for example, that are decomposing the material, they think it's a pest and they'll spray. The same with the whirl maggot. One of the biggest problems with the whirl maggot is that it induces farmers to spray, but we never see any yield reduction. The same with leaf folder.
Now our crop is finally starting to exert itself. It's within a week of maximum tillering, so it's growing quite strongly now, and a lot of those gaps that we've had to live with for several weeks are finally starting to fill in, so we're feeling better. This week we're going to take the opportunity to talk about what I would call the biotic influences on the crop and making an assessment of it. So that's how animals, plants, funguses and viruses, how they're interacting with the crop, both beneficial and not beneficial. I have with me here Nancy Castillo, who is a specialist in assessing rice crops for the biotic influences and the level of injury that's coming from it. And Nancy and I will step through the process of assessing the rice crop for insects, for weeds, for diseases, both from viruses and funguses. So in we go.
So next week what we intend to do is that we will be collecting data on injuries caused by animal pests. Animal pests refer to insect pests, snails and rats. And then we will be also assessing injuries caused by diseases, viral diseases, bacterial diseases and fungal diseases. And then we will be also assessing injuries caused by weeds. Since this is direct seeded rice, so we have here a quadrat, what we call as we consider this some kind of a magic weapon. So this is equivalent to 1 hill in transplanted rice. So we would actually be sampling for diseases and insect insect injuries. We will be using 10 quadrats. We'll be sampling from 10 quadrats. And then we would be also we will be sampling weeds from 3 areas. Each area would be about 1 meter by 1 meter. So we would be assessing weeds relative to the height of the canopy, and we will be recording the type of weeds that we will find.
So we have a sweep net?
Yes, this is a sweep net. We use this for counting the flying insects, in this case mainly green leaf hoppers. Green leaf hopper is the vector of tungrel. For the tapping method, we have this small pan here with water. It has a little detergent, and we use it for counting sucking insects like plant hoppers, white back plant hoppers, brown plant hoppers, and in the surveys we do in other parts of the Philippines, we also catch rice bugs.
Okay.
Black bugs rather.
So with these magic weapons,
yeah,
next
magic
week
weapons.
when the crop reaches the stage of maximum tillering, you'll make an assessment according to our data sheet, and then again in the reproductive stage, in the grain filling and mature stage, we'll make another assessment. And that should give us a good idea of what biological things have done both for and against our rice crop.
Yeah, it's now about 45 days after sowing. So as you can see, the crop starts elongating. So we have hit pretty much the end of the tillering, and it's now time for the crop to develop more biomass. So you can see it's got quite a few nice looking tillers here in this place, and the stem starts elongating now. So we're coming then gradually closer to what will then be the next stage, paniculation, when the next thing that we also did today, like we said last week already, Nancy's team just went through around here, and they just did an assessment of all the different kinds of crop damage that we might have had, so diseases, insects, weeds, even rats. So we'll see what they found out, but they went across the whole field and stopped at about 30 locations and assessed what we've got there. So that'll be interesting information and a bit more objective than what we saw ourselves. Sometimes we are getting biased by thinking, okay, we've got this problem and this problem and this problem. But they've done it in a very systematic manner, and we will see what they have. So, but when you just sort of look around the whole field here, so from the distance it starts looking actually quite okay. So we've got a pretty good dense green canopy building up. So if we can support this now with enough nutrients and good water management, and we don't run into more pest problems, we should be okay. Days after sowing, so the crop is moving into heading stage. You can see it's getting quite tall. So what I'm doing here today is I'm going to check whether we need a little bit more nitrogen. So just looking at it, I have the feeling that there are some places where it gets a little bit yellowish, and we know that right now we need a lot of nitrogen because the panicles are formed, and we want to make sure that there's no limitation of that important nutrient. So the tool that I'm using for this is this leaf color chart, which has 4 different shades of green, and it should guide me whether I need an extra little bit of nitrogen or not. So what I'm basically doing is I'm walking through the field, and I've been taking about 15-20 readings at different places, and whenever I hit the spot, I'll basically take a leaf, the uppermost leaf, I'll put it on the chart in the middle of the leaf, and I find the green shade that matches the color of the leaf best. So this one here is matching perfectly the shade number 3, and that basically tells us that we're getting a little bit low already. Yeah? But I have to take, of course, many readings because there's some variability in the leaf. And I've done this now, so I've just finished this, and I've concluded that on average my leaf color chart reading is actually less than 3, so it's between 2.5 and 3 in many cases. So that's why I've decided to put on an extra amount of about 25 kg of nitrogen as urea at this stage, and that should probably complete our whole fertilizer application regime. Other than that, at this stage of the crop, there is really nothing we can do at this point. I saw some weeds coming up here and there. No insect damage really that I'm worried about right now, so our decision to not spray any insecticide so far seems to work out. And the rest now, we need to wait and hope for more sunshine so that hopefully we'll still get some kind of decent yield.
So we start with a visual estimate of how ready the crop is, and we first look at the proportion of yellow grains, the proportion of straw yellow grains. Now Martin has suggested an ideal amount for harvest would be 80% yellow. Now in front of me here, we always have an issue as to whether it's representative or not. It's probably 50 to 60% yellow, something of that order. It's not quite ready yet. Now a more objective and professional way to assess how ready the crop is will be to measure its moisture content.
Yep, and this is one way to do that. This is a moisture meter, so-called moisture meter. It measures the resistance of the crop, which is basically dependent on the moisture content. And you have a small sample tray. So you take a sample from a panicle. As Lee said, 80% of the grains should be straw yellow. That basically says 80% of one panicle.
Getting representative is always a challenge. There's almost no.
It's a challenge, yeah. So you take a small sample like this, fill it in there, and then what you do with this instrument, basically you crush it. Oops, can I give you this?
Mix it with this.
You turn the knob and crush it, turn it all the way to the end, and then you measure the resistance, and that gets translated in the reading of the moisture content, and in this case it's 21.6%.
Now what we're going to do is mix the greener one I've harvested.
And because this is a very small sample, it's not really representative neither for a small plot nor for the field. So what you have to do is you have to, in one location, you should do at least 3 different measurements. So now in this sample, for example, you have a lot more green grains than in the previous one. So the reading should be a lot higher. (27.9%). And you would take at least 3 samples, and then you have a button here where you can average the readings, and then you get the average reading for that location. And then what you have to do is basically also measure in a representative way in the field, because the crop doesn't mature evenly everywhere in the field. So Lee is just getting a sample from another location.
Doing my best to stay on my feet.
Trying to find a green one.
It's probably semi-respectable.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of straw particles in there.
Not very well threshed.
What you want to have is only grains in there. And it should be basically just 1 layer of grains, or a little bit more than that. So we crush it again, take our reading, 27.7, and we can't do an average because I just did that and we only have 1 more reading in the moment.
So it's well and truly above 24, or it might be 27, 28, 29, something like that.
Yeah, in there we measured around up to 30%.
We did.
So I think it's probably around 28, 29.
We're facing the final tricky decision to irrigate or not to irrigate. That is the question. So we're considering how moist the soil is now. How moist is the soil now?
Moist.
Right. we're considering what the weather's like. What's the weather like?
Hot. Dry.
And we're considering how long we'd expect until we harvest. And our consensus is about 10 days to 2 weeks, something of that range. It'll be close to 2 weeks' time before you're back to do the deed. So we need this to last, to finish properly. I think it needs the 2 weeks. But it's moist, it's heavy clay, and we do want our combine to stay on the ground, not to explore the underground. I vote keep it dry.
Yeah, I would have, if it was an experiment and I knew that we would be doing hand harvesting, I would put on another irrigation just for safety. But we need to figure that we have to come in with a combine, and so the carrying capacity of that soil will be the deciding factor, and we can't delay harvest because we see some lodging coming in, so I'll go with the majority vote.
Yeah, I agree.
So no more irrigation, let's see. But I pray for a little bit of rain tonight, maybe.
Well, on recent patterns, I think you'll probably have that wish granted. So there we have it. We won't irrigate again, and it'll be in approximately 2 weeks. We'll come back and harvest about May 2nd.
Yeah, I was on a trip last week, and then Lee sent me a note that we had 70% lodging. So when I came back yesterday afternoon, the first thing I did was rush out to the field, and then this is what I saw. That's a lot more than 70%, so it's basically a complete mess now. Lodging, I guess there can be many reasons for this, but probably the primary reason is we've had a broadcast zone crop which is not anchored very deep in the soil. We had unnecessary rain now, I would say.
Unnecessary rain.
And you can see it's all lodging in one direction here, so we must have had some wind too. I don't think we had too much nitrogen, although that obviously sometimes contributes too. So what we're going to do now, Lee?
We're going to harvest it. So as I explained in an earlier clip, there's one crucial advantage. If we take this section of crop here, it's lodged, but there's still some airspace under the crop. There's 3 or 4 inches of airspace under there, and that's a crucial difference. The combine won't have too much trouble as long as we're careful. If it gets flatter than that, then we are in real trouble, and that's the concern. Ideally, we probably should wait 1 more day, but there's already threatening looking clouds over there, so I think it might be time to act before it gets any worse.
Yeah, and we had another rain yesterday afternoon, so I'm getting nervous too. It is still quite wet underneath here, but as long as we get through with the combine and pull it up, well, I think we have no choice. Let's try it.
The whole field.
Yeah, I think we need to get an initial cut.
Initial cut, and then after that you could do.
Yeah.
You could have some the operation. It is easy. You just pause.
Well, I know.
So that's nice. Not perfect, but nice.
I had a lot of trouble going that way.
Yeah, that's good.
We've harvested the rice, now we're at the business end, where we mill the rice into a product to eat. So the first thing that happened after we harvested the rice is we took it to dry it. It was at a moisture content of about 21% from memory, and we took it and dried it in a flatbed dryer down to a moisture of about 14%. So Martin's going to measure the moisture content of a sample before our eyes, and hopefully it's what I claim it is.
Yeah. So I can't actually measure the sample that has been in the mill because it's already milled.
Yeah.
But I have another sample here, and the ideal moisture content for milling is between 13 and 14%. And so the first step would basically be to measure the moisture content, and this is an example for a moisture meter, the IRRI moisture meter. You put a small sample of grains in there, and then you crush them, and then by measuring the resistance it gives you the moisture content, and this basically tells you that the sample that we have is still too wet. We couldn't use that for milling.
So that's more than 16%.
It's more than 14%.
More than 14.
in this case, and basically this would also tell us if it's right for milling, between 12 and 14%, or whether it's right for seeds.
What happens if you mill it when it's wetter than 14%?
If we mill it wetter, then the grain is very soft, and we get a lot of damage in the rice mill by basically the machines crushing the grains, and so your milling yield would be a lot lower.
And what if it's too dry?
If it's too dry, then it's too brittle, and again you get, because of mechanical stress, you get more cracking because it's so brittle, and again you get more losses.
Okay.
And for the drying, there are different options. This grain was dried in a flatbed dryer, but the flatbed dryer is a very simple technology that can be locally produced and produces a reasonably good quality. But then there are also more sophisticated dryers, like we have one over there, which is a so-called recirculating batch dryer, which allows us to produce really the optimum quality of the paddy before we do the milling.
After the grain has been dried to the appropriate moisture content, it's then delivered to the mill. And the first stage is the dehulling, where we have two rubber rollers set at a very close clearance to each other. And one roller is travelling just a little bit slower than the other roller. And that abrasion motion, that pincer motion, removes the husk from the rice. It then goes on to a gravity table, which then in a horizontal reciprocating motion, it's on a slight angle, and that successfully removes the hulled rice, the hulled brown rice, from the rice that was not successfully hulled. And the rice that was not successfully hulled goes back to be dehulled again. After that, it goes through 3 stages of polishing: an abrasion stone polisher, a friction polisher, and then you also have a choice of a mist polisher if you want that final, shall I call it, sheen, for a really high quality product that really looks as desirable as it tastes. And there's one final process after the polishing process. It's then graded for size, both through a rotary sifter and through a length grader, and that separates the whole rice from the broken rice. The final stage in a sophisticated rice mill is the colour sorter, which is an ingenious piece of technology that runs streams of milled rice grain in a single grain stream. There's sensors that sense the colour of individual grains, and if the colour is not white enough, basically, that could be from poor milling, it could be because it's a foreign object like a stone. There's nothing as much fun as a stone in your rice. A short, sharp jet of compressed air will remove the grain, and so that final high standard sorting process is quite a common process in high standard rice mills. And then hence you have the finished product. Whole grain, well milled rice with a known quantity of brokens in it, and that's really the objective of the whole process. The good news is we made a profit.
That's good.
Not a huge profit, but a profit. So we grew 5.24 tonnes to the hectare of rice, and we valued it at 14 pesos per kilogram here in the Philippines, which is equivalent to about 30 US cents or $300 per tonne of paddy rice. In summary, I doubt these figures are particularly visible to the film. We earned $440 from the field. We spent $350 growing it, so we made, according to this, $84 in profit, which at least pays for the coffee we're drinking and a fair bit more.
Well, that's for the field, but if we extrapolate this to a whole hectare, which is what a normal farmer would probably have, so that's a net profit of $335 per hectare. So,
is that a normal profit? Is that what a farmer would be happy?
I think it's probably quite common, particularly if you have deep well irrigation and pumping costs to cover. Yeah. If you are an irrigated farmer in the Philippines who has access to canal water or for irrigation scheme water, the typical profit is probably more like $500 per hectare. That's what I remember measuring once. So we're below that, but that's primarily really the reason is because of the high irrigation costs.
Which probably explains, as you look across the rice growing world, that dry season rice is generally confined to those locations where water is easy and cheap to access.
Yeah, it has to do
for exactly that reason.
Good, I think that wraps it up. We've not become rich, at least we haven't lost money. I think we've learned a lot. Yeah.
We have.
So we'll promise to do better next time. Right?
Cheers.
Cheers.